I'm Jodi Klugman-Rabb, a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. I took a DNA test for fun that led to the shocking discovery that the man who raised me was not my biological father, that I am an NPE, or a non-paternal event.
And I'm Christina Bryan Fitzgibbons. I've been a genetic and family investigator in Northern California since 2015. Most of my work focuses on interpreting DNA results and locating biological family. And that's how I met Jodi.
This is Sex, Lies, and the Truth, a collection of stories devoted to unexpected DNA discoveries, like donor conceptions, adoptions, or falsified and misled parentage discovered from at-home DNA tests, like non-paternal events. These are real people talking candidly about the rejection, shock, vulnerability, or fears that shape their stories. Some will make you laugh, cry, and cringe. You know, just like your family, only with a shrink and genealogist on call.
I look at all of these questions, like I think you're doing a great service to people when you talk about it. So I ask you these sort of deep things, and knowing you're a therapist and you've come to the other end of it, which is why you're able to help others.
I have nothing in mind. I am completely putting myself in your hands.
I love this.
Yeah.
This is so great.
Give me your best shot.
Well, it's not my best shot, but there were things that were on my list. You ready for this one?
I am.
So I wanted to ask you about trust issues. Your entire life, having lived underneath a lie from the people who are the closest to you, your parents.
Yes. So trust issues that I didn't ever know that I had. And I recall vividly going through my master's program in the early 2000s. And we had to do an exercise with our mothers, figuratively, with our mothers in class. And I kept coming back to it and saying, I don't feel like I can do this exercise. I don't really have any trust issues with my mom. And I look back at that memory now and I'm like, who the hell was that?
Yeah.
What was wrong with her? Yeah, trust issues are a thing for me now. I didn't realize I had them before, but in hindsight, when I look back at my life, childhood, adolescence, all of it, the moment somebody hurt me, I was out of there. And it happened, I think in any normal amount that anybody else would experience, but like no second chances. Now I totally get why.
My God.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like I have trust issues now.
Like that before you have a relationship, like a friendship or business, anything, any relationships you have, that you take them very seriously and that you spend time wondering if, can I trust even?
I don't know that I take a relationship any more seriously, although, certainly with my professional training, I'm trained to come at a therapeutic relationship in a particular way. I try really hard to delineate that from my personal life. And
right.
That's a whole separate issue that I think socially people are sometimes freaked out by me as a therapist, and it keeps them at a distance from me. But I don't know that I participate in that. What was the other part of your question?
I think since other people knew your story before you knew your story.
All the other adults in my life knew them. Yeah.
Right. And then when you knew, you were asked to respond a certain way.
It seems everybody knew about it. And I still have a little lack of clarity on if they knew about it because everything started with Wayne as my stepdad and then miraculously changed to my bio dad. And so everybody already kind of assumed from the beginning that I wasn't his because that was the storyline. Or if he actually ever told anyone, look, I know that I'm not her dad and I just want to be here anyway. Like I tend to believe that he knew and that he told certain people. I know he told his best friend because he told me. I've told other family members on my mom's side who already knew. And they were like, but we already knew this.
Yeah.
Did they know already because that's how I was introduced? Or that's how Wayne was introduced to them, as not my biological dad to begin with?
Right?
Yeah.
So whether or not he knew or not changed nothing. He treated you and loved you as his daughter.
That's not disputed.
Yeah.
However, some of the people we're referring to knew and insisted in the beginning of this, when all the discoveries were being made, they pretty much insisted that I keep this secret and just learn to live with it.
Why do you think they did that?
I'll give you my professional opinion first.
Then I want to hear your
Then I'll answer personally.
Yes,
so
please.
Professionally, I understand it to mean that they were threatened. They were perceiving that their standing in the community would be changed because of this. And, we should probably disclose, you do know that side of my family somewhat. So, I think that just ethically needs to be put out there.
I do happen to know who your cousins are and like them all very much, and their children. Yeah. The moment I sort of realized what was involved with your case, I had no idea until I was in it. I was like, oh, shoot. It didn't change how I went about anything with you.
God, no. You were very professional, and you were very friendly and helpful, and you've done a good job about keeping it separate. They were fearful from a standpoint of social and cultural reputation and era that they were raised in, and all of that if this got out, it would damage their reputation. Didn't seem too concerned about how it affected me, which is the piece that I still have some real issue with. I can understand on an intellectual level why they freaked out and got really aggressive with, you need to keep this to yourself. And I don't know why you would push this any further, even so far as to say, what if your in-laws don't accept you anymore because you no longer have the pedigree? And that is word for word what my aunt said. And I probably will never be able to forget that.
I'll say that one more time. Exactly what was said to you.
So when I wasn't complying with their pleas to keep it to myself and not let the secret out, they actually escalated high enough to say, what if your in-laws no longer accept you because you no longer have the pedigree? Meaning the Jewish pedigree, that I no longer came from a Jewish household. Now, we are Reform Jews, which means it doesn't matter whether it's on the mother side or the father side. Right. That really matters from the conservative or Orthodox standpoint. So from their perspective, it made a significant difference that I would no longer have that clout and that pedigree. And they pulled out all the stops to try and get me to get back in line with the status quo. It was incredibly hurtful. So hurtful that I made some decisions from then on that have kind of permanently changed our relationship. In hindsight, which seems like a kind of a naive way in a relationship that I didn't have that sort of trust established, that I needed somebody to know what was going on. And I had asked that aunt to do the test before, so that we could determine DNA relations. And she handled that really well. So I kind of figured, all right, I'll see what I can get from here. And it didn't work out well for me at all.
So did it change their standing in the community as they were concerned?
No, I don't think it changed the standing in their community, but I also don't know from their perspective. Maybe from their perspective it did, but I seriously doubt it. Intellectually, I can't imagine that it did. My personal experience can't have had much of an impact on their reputation in the community, except for the fact that I have been rather forthcoming that they weren't very supportive in the end. That part probably has impacted them.
Well, in what way? Do they stand by that decision and think that other people support them in that? Or are they embarrassed?
So there's backstory to this, that I had a lot of issues with them after my dad died. And we worked through that. Sort of. We worked through it enough that I felt comfortable trying to continue a relationship. And it worked really well with my aunt and uncle, but it did not work well with my cousins. And so when this kind of came around and there was more dismissal, I was like, all right, I'm done. I've already given you your second chance. I'm moving on.
I would love any listeners of the podcast to go to our Facebook or any of our socials and tell us what they think and give us their stories. Did they also have a relationship that soured because of somebody finding their truth? And all opinions are welcome, regardless. Maybe you think Jodi is just absolutely out of line. I don't think she is, but if you do think that, I would still love to hear it, because I think having conversations about these things and you being open about it is important.
I'm aware that I have a bit of a mixed message here, because I usually tout to either on my socials or, I'm very clear with my clients that you get to decide what kind of relationship you want in your family, in your peer group, in your work life. You get to decide. And if the person on the other end is not reciprocating the way that you like, then you have to make a decision around what you're willing to engage with and what you're not, what hard limits are and all that sort of stuff. And I have been pretty clear in a lot of my blog reports and different social media posts that there's room for everybody. But I think there's also a limit to when you try and make room for everybody and you make room for two sides of an experience, even when you don't agree, that there is a limit when it becomes hurtful. And that toxicity that comes from the pain, that's a no-go. So that should be a hard limit for people. Right. So that's part of the question that I would like to hear answered from our listeners. If you feel like it's one and done, kind of like I said earlier, that I realized about myself and in my early life, or at what point do you decide, all right, I'm going to try and work this through like I did with my family the first time? And then when do you feel comfortable saying enough is enough and this is just harmful at this point and I'm ending it like I've done now? Kind of feel like there are different life cycles to this.
Right. When this all came about, did it make you think about or mourn Wayne again or differently? Or did it bring up anything with regard to the passing of the father that raised you?
Yes. And in a few different ways. So when my dad passed, I was in college. I was finishing up my second to last semester of college. So he missed my graduation. And my mom's functioning really declined. So I honestly felt like I couldn't grieve. And in psychological vernacular, we called that delayed grief. And I think I delayed for quite a while, several years. And by the time I started engaging in it, it was kind of a slow burn. I didn't just hit like a cliff and go over it, but it was a slow burn over several years. And then I kind of made some peace with it, probably around the time my kids were born. Then when I discovered Tim, it all started to come back up again. And in a very palpable way, the day that I met Tim, it was like a floodgate opening again in terms of mourning. And that was probably the big confusing piece that magnified everything that day. Because on the way home from Tim's house, I felt like I was out of my body. And it was a very uncomfortable, very disturbing feeling where honestly, I just couldn't even sit still in my own skin. So that was a big part of it, because I kind of felt like I lost him all over again, even though rationally that makes no sense, but that's the feeling.
It does. That's what it does, because I'm asking you the question.
Yeah.
I'm putting myself in your position.
Yeah.
And I always wondered if meeting Tim made you feel any sense of guilt, or that you were feeling like you were replacing or
no, that was my family's fear. That was, I think, to a degree, my mom's fear. But then when I found Sean, my brother, she was really upset about feeling replaced by him.
Just
I
regard
never
to that.
felt like I was replacing Wayne. I felt like I had such a good dad, and I had such a good relationship with my dad. And it ended so abruptly, so early. I was 22 when he died. He was 50. It honestly felt like I deserve another chance to have a father figure. I've been without one for half my life, and I miss it. He was a good enough dad to have left a pretty severe vacuum. Tim isn't a typical father, and nor could anybody be in this role. I don't think you can't just slide Tim in and say, he's going to pick up where Wayne left off. But the manner in which he does fill that role is exactly what I needed. I just needed another parental person.
Right.
And he does that in a lot of ways. The first few months that I knew him, we'd be playing baseball games with my son's baseball team over near his house in the East Bay, and he would come and drop off snacks and stuff. And he would give Ben directions on how to get in and out of the area that he wasn't familiar with. And so he was acting in his little fatherly way, which I thought was really cute and made an enormous difference to me in how I felt anchored in the world.
Well, I also think you needed it more too, because you were having so much dysfunction with your mom. So you were parentless at the moment. What do you think that, and this is from your point of view, once he opened the door, he was in hook, line, and sinker. Like, I don't know what you said, but it didn't take much convincing. But is that also because, as we know, you were never far from his thoughts?
And that's what he's said. Yes, that I was never far from his thoughts. I don't know what I said either to change his mind. I think it was my persistence. So we might need to tee it up again for the listeners that I literally went to the door. He did answer it, but pretended to be somebody else and sort of sent me away. And then I just wasn't going to have that. So I went back and said, I think that you are him. And he was reluctant to really let me in, literally and figuratively. And then 3 hours later, we had one of the most poignant discussions in my life. I think it had to do with my persistence. He and my brother have mentioned that that's a quality I seem to share with my grandmother, with Tim's mom. So I think that I was displaying some family traits that might have been endearing to him.
Oh my gosh. So that was my next question. What did you learn from him in terms of, now this was not a planned question either. What things do you know from feedback that he has said are similar that you have that remind him of other family members or people in the family? So his mother was one.
I think it's mostly his mom. We've talked a little bit about my grandfather, but I don't recall anybody saying that I shared any characteristics with him other than a general, evidently Scottish trait of stubbornness that is present in most of the family members.
Oh my goodness.
And
okay.
I had usually attributed that to my mom's side, but I guess I get it from both sides.
I don't call it stubborn. I call it strong.
Yeah.
Stubborn means that you'll never give in even when you're wrong. And I know that's not true about you. So
yeah, that is not true about me.
Strong-willed.
I am strong-willed.
Yeah.
I am very much a pit bull. When I get something in my mind, I will go and go and go and go. Most of the comparisons seem to have been made with me and my grandmother, whose name was Mary. She was described as having a lot of moxie, and that's how I've been described by lots of different people over my life, but including my new family members. And a dear friend of mine who's now no longer with us has always described me as being someone who suffered no fools. And I think that's just a different way of saying the same thing.
Right. I love that word, moxie.
Yeah, me too.
I just love it. I may start using that next episode. It'll be termed moxie.
I'll just label this one
moxie. I love it. Yes,
Jodi's moxie.
Oh my goodness. let's do this one. First, I wanted to hear about in your discovery, we already know that you had been on a trip to Scotland and all of this came about. In terms of the ethnic realizations and the things that you learned, having always known to be Jewish and that's how you identified, what has changed with regard to anything sort of in that ethnic category? So religious or not?
So I have to start back in my early childhood. I was not raised any particular religion. Neither of my parents were observant in their own family of origin religions. So my dad was the Jew and my mom was raised Roman Catholic Italian. And both of them seem to have kind of rebelled in a way. Definitely my mom rebelled, less so my dad. He, in his words, he didn't feel like he needed to attend synagogue in order to observe the Jewish faith. He could just act it every day, which I greatly respect that point of view. I think that's very real. My mom, unfortunately, experienced a lot of the typical abuses that you hear about in the Catholic Church, and she hated it because of that. I don't fault her for that at all. So I was raised, I believe, to be more agnostic. We barely observed any of the Jewish holidays. I attended Passover once a year with my dad and his family, and that was it. We never celebrated Hanukkah. It's not a significant Jewish holiday to begin with. It's been elevated to compete with Christmas. So that was never observed. We always had a Christmas tree, and that was part of my dad's choice to have a Christmas tree. And I think that a lot of that was to help me to feel like I fit in with my peers. It was just what everybody did. And he enjoyed it. He put Christmas lights up on the exterior of the house when I was growing up. So
wow,
his Jewish values were very different than what you might conceive of on a conservative level. So I chose to be Jewish in college. I feel like part of my Jewish education included my elementary school, which was a Catholic school in the area, San Domenico. And although it's no longer part of the diocese or religious in any way, it wasn't secular at the time. And I was taught by nuns, and I was told at every conceivable opportunity that Jews killed Jesus. And so I have this Jewish side of my family. I'm the only Jew in the school for most of the time up until 7th or 8th grade. Then there was one other girl. And I learned to kind of dislike Judaism because of that. And it was after leaving that school and starting to get a sense of this is a part of my family that I don't know very much about, and I really want to know more. And the more I know about Judaism, the more I like it. So I took a few classes in college, literally classes on Judaism that I got college credit for, and decided quite literally in, I think it was my sophomore year in college, that, okay, I'm going to be Jewish. And at some point I will go through all the Jewish rites of passage that I missed. I was never bat mitzvahed, not typically a thing that women did throughout much of human history in Judaism. It was always just for men. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a reform movement to have girls be bat mitzvahed. And I realized when I got married in a Jewish ceremony that I was going to want to have gone through all the same life cycle events that I would be expecting my kids to go through. So I did a bat mitzvah as an adult. Both of my kids were there. And then when this came along and I discovered I'm not biologically Jewish at all on either side, it was very upsetting to me because this was something I had chosen to be part of and had pursued. And then my mom took a DNA test and she discovered that she's Jewish biologically. We're not quite sure exactly how it came through, but it's...
I haven't been on that case yet.
No, you haven't. It's a Sephardic Jew. So my dad's family was Ashkenazi Jew, so European, Eastern European. The Sephardic Jew is Middle Eastern in origin, and they came through Spain. So somewhere along the way, we had some Persian somewhere in there. And now I'm actually more Jewish than I was when I started this whole thing.
I wanted to ask your opinion. For those out there who are listening who are reaching out to biological parents mother or father, either by adoption or by finding a NPE status. Sometimes in the beginning and sometimes forever, there's a rejection, but there's siblings. So maybe mom or dad says, I'm not interested in having a relationship with you or knowing you, or they don't respond. And you've either been told or it has been quietly mentioned that you should not make contact with them. Now you are all adults. You can clearly tell that I have an opinion on this.
Yes. Yeah, you're not biased at all here.
No, I'm not at all. However, you're the professional. I'm not, right? So I go into this saying, fuck that, man. You can do whatever you want. Like, give them some time. Make sure that they have time to talk to them, right? But I also believe that maybe the parents coming from a generation where this is shameful, and we are in a generation where, man, we got bigger fish to fry than this. What do you think about when parents have given their child no choice? I don't want you to tell them, or I don't want you to know them.
I say that's horseshit. It's anybody's personal decision what they get to do as an adult. And not to say that biological parent doesn't have the right to their feelings or their needs. They do. But that right stops at the attempt to control another adult and their behavior. So if you don't want me to go meet my sibling, noted, I get it, but that's not a decision you get to make. I ultimately get to make that. And ultimately, so does my sibling. They're adults. Right. They get to do it as well.
I think the dilemma comes in the initial part, which is they maybe have not told their children about you. And so, coming from my position as a professional in this, I do think they should be given the opportunity to share their stories. Anything that is related to them personally, I do think they should have the opportunity to share that on their own.
Everybody has a right to their feelings. Everybody has a right to their needs. And there's room for everybody. I like that slogan. I keep using it. There's room for everybody. There doesn't need to be cutoffs or rejections if people would just look at their own stuff and work on what they're afraid of. So let the siblings contact themselves. It may end up fizzing out anyway, because if a parent is that worried and that dead set against the NPE coming into the family, then the kid's going to pick up on that or hear it directly from the parent and be unwilling to rock the boat.
It's almost like they hold the biological parent will hold their relationship with you for ransom.
Yeah.
If you tell the sibling, I will have nothing to do with you. I've seen where they've left you hanging there. I'm not quite ready. Let's just you and I know each other and keep it a secret. Because if they find out, then I'm not going to communicate with you anymore. I could see where it's really hard to stand up for yourself and say, but I really want to know them. But then you're risking losing that relationship again.
So I can relate to that with Tim and Sean. So I knew going into this that Sean existed because you found him. But
oh yeah.
When it came time to talk about that in my 3-hour initial conversation with Tim, he was very standoffish about Sean. He was not going to tell me very much other than where he lived and that I had a nephew and he had a lovely wife. And it kind of all ended there. And when I said I would really like to talk with him, it was probably one of the more animated moments in the conversation for him, where he said, whoa, and literally put up his hands and said, you need to slow down. This has to happen at my pace. And of course, here's my pit bull tendency coming out. I was like, hell no, man, I've just basically pushed my way into your house. You tried to push me away and I came back. You think I'm going to listen to that? I already know this guy's name and where he is. And I can have, didn't say this out loud, but I can have Christina find him.
She'll have a phone number and email address, but by the end of the hour.
By the end of the hour. So on that level, I can really relate to that. Like, no, this isn't your decision. This is my decision. But I did have to be respectful of the fact that he wanted this to go a certain way now that he was going to be part of it. And what I think I missed in the conversation, simply because of the level of emotional engagement, that 3 hours I was a wreck at the end of. And I'm pretty sure he probably stated, look, I'm going to contact him and I'll get back to you. And I feel like I remember that fuzzily in my memory. And really what stood out for me in the end was, he's not going to let me do this. He's not going to let me, I'm not going to have access to Sean. And I started to get really upset by that. And I wondered, how long is this going to take before he contacts him or I'm allowed to? And what I didn't realize is the moment Ben and I left Tim's house, he was on the phone with Sean, outing himself and saying, so you have a sister you didn't know about.
Right.
So he took it very seriously. And that whole day went through his entire family Rolodex and told the story to everybody.
Is there a concept or something you have learned that you have mastered that you take into your practice now?
First thing that came up when you asked that was how to walk through the pain, how to kind of tolerate the pain of being in this massive transition, an identity transition, a life transition incorporating so much grief. And the thing that got me through that the most was a song, actually. And I'm not a particularly large country music fan, but somewhere along the line, I heard this song by Rodney Atkins called If You're Going Through Hell. And I probably listened to that on loop daily, probably 45 minutes to an hour every day for God knows how long, until it just kind of became a mantra that I need to keep walking a straight line. I can't try and put this all down and say, I can't take it anymore and try and find a way to get around it or avoid it. I just have to keep going through it. And maybe that's part of the strength that you mentioned earlier. I don't know, but that was an enormous help. I think there are other ways of looking at it and saying the same thing. And one of the other ways is God gives you what you can handle. That was something over the last 3 years that as various other things came at us, and including the DNA discovery, all of these things are coming because I can handle them. Even though in the moment you feel like you may not be able to, but you can. You're going to get through the other side because at the end, all of the things that you've lived through, you've survived.
Thanks, Jodi, for sharing your story and for your candor. I know a lot of our listeners will identify with many of the things that you've mentioned and said. So thanks again.
Sex, Lies, and the Truth is written and produced by Christina Fitzgibbons and Jodi Klugman-Rabb, two moms and professional women living the dream. We crack each other up, we can sniff out the truth, and we help people tell their stories. If you or someone you know would like to tell their story, you can reach us at sexliesandthetruth.com.